On Saturday the 7th of November 2009 there was a meeting sponsored by the Fabian Society in London. It was paid for by the European Commission. Also involved was UACES, which is a group of university professors who are working to further the European Union. And also involved was an organisation called eSharp, which uses modern communications to further the agenda. Now, that meeting was talking about the Copenhagen Climate Conference, which is due in December, very, very shortly. And at that conference, they're hoping to get an agreement on carbon, or the production of carbon. It seems as if there's not going to be much chance of them getting the agreement, but it should be said, it's mentioned, that this environmental subject is the way that communism is being foisted onto the world. There was an interesting quotation from a gentleman called Bloice. He was the Moscow correspondent of an American communist paper. I think it was called the Moscow Daily World or the New York Daily World, I can't remember exactly what. But anyway, Bloice was a friend of Mikhail Gorbachev, and Bloice is quoted as saying that the environmental issue would bring far more people into the communist orbit than the peace movement ever did.
See, I don't even like to call it the environmental movement anymore, because really it is a political activist movement, and they have become hugely influential at a global level. By the mid-'80s, a majority of people now agreed with all of the reasonable things we in the environmental movement were saying they should do. Now, when a majority of people agree with you, it's pretty hard to remain confrontational with them. And so the only way to remain anti-establishment was to adopt ever more extreme positions. When I left Greenpeace, it was in the midst of them adopting a campaign to ban chlorine worldwide. Like I said, you guys, this is one of the elements in the periodic table, you know. I mean, I'm not sure if that's in our jurisdiction to be banning a whole element.
Destroying the wall were soon down.
The other reason that environmental extremism emerged was because world communism failed, the wall came down, and a lot of peaceniks and political activists moved into the environmental movement, bringing their neo-Marxism with them, and learned to use green language in a very clever way to cloak agendas that actually have more to do with anti-capitalism and anti-globalization than they do anything with ecology or science.
It's very important that we state that the environmental issue is being used by communists, the Fabians, European Union, to promote their worldview, which is basically the removal of people's freedom and to a large extent the removal of people's property. And we've got to say as well that this is being done on bad science which has now been proved to have been cooked up by the United Nations and others. This carbon issue, there's many people that have studied it, but the Soviets have studied it. They've drilled down into the Antarctic ice. They've gone down, I don't know how far, maybe even 3 kilometres, I'm not sure, an awful long distance, and they can check the amount of carbon dioxide that was in the atmosphere at any given moment, right back thousands, I guess even millions of years ago. And they know that the carbon dioxide has varied throughout the history of the world, the amount of it. But what they've also discovered is that carbon dioxide actually follows warming. It doesn't cause the warming. So people like Al Gore and his fellow travellers, the UN, the Fabian Society, the EU, they're basing their tactics on something which is patently false. I mean, it's phony. I mean, I was thinking the gentleman, the scientist from the Pasteur Institute in Paris, and I can't remember his name now, but he's written about it. There's lots of things that are mentioned, for example, in Philip Foster's book, While the Earth Endures. He lays it out. That book, incidentally, was commended by Václav Klaus, the president of the Czech Republic. He's read it. He's interested in environmental issues. I think that one of the most important things we've got to talk about is the way that the issue of carbon dioxide is conflated with pollution. Now, carbon dioxide is not a pollutant. It actually is necessary for plant growth. When they're growing tomatoes in glass houses, one of the ways they get more tomatoes, or bigger, fatter ones, is to pump carbon dioxide into the greenhouse, because it promotes plant growth. Now, what they're doing, they're conflating the production of carbon dioxide and the production of genuine pollutants, all these things like sulfur and all the horrible things that get pumped out of some industrial factories. It's two different things. Carbon dioxide is not, repeat, is not a pollutant. It is important to get these other things under control. Of course it is. It's very important. But the United Nations, the EU, the Fabians, all these organisations are basing their political aims on a lie, and I think that's very, very important to state that. There's plenty of information available on the internet. There's more and more and more of it coming out. Al Gore has got a conflict of interest. He's got shares in a company in America, Silver Springs, I think it is, that's profiting by the political adoption of this carbon scam. So that's the important thing, to get that information out. Well, we need to just cover the subject of carbon trading. That is a thing which is a very, very clever, involved subject, but it's a creation of carbon credits which can then be traded, and it's a fantastic thing really for making money, because it's a completely new financial instrument. That is one of the reasons why the City of London is so keen to support it. In the final analysis, the idea is to take money from the rich, the Western countries, and distribute it into the poor countries. That's the theory. Whether that is likely to happen to the benefit of the population of those countries, I would be very, very surprised. I think it's much more likely to be a scam to make money, because it's certainly based on false science. So if they can base it on false science, it certainly doesn't bode very well for the general ethos of the thing. But what actually is a carbon credit? That's a good question, isn't it? In this scheme, carbon credits are issued to different countries, which is actually a license to produce carbon dioxide. And then if you produce more than you should do, you've got to buy some credit from another country, or if you don't produce as much as that they say that you're allowed to, then you can sell it. You can sell the surplus. Now, the whole thing is spurious, because we're talking about something that isn't even a pollutant. The amount of carbon dioxide in the air has been far, far higher at different periods in the Earth's history. And in any case, the Earth has a self-regulating system for the absorption of carbon dioxide. You can learn much more about this from, for example, from Philip Foster's book, While the Earth Endures. I won't purport to tell you all about it, because I'm not a scientist. It should be exposed. It's done in the name of environmental protection, but it's actually an attack on the human race, in actual fact. It's anti-human. People will suffer from it in all countries, but they'll suffer more in poor countries. It's a diabolical plan, actually, and it's a Luciferian thing. And why is carbon trading anti-human? Well, one of the things that's going to happen if they get this scheme fully into place is that the amount of electricity countries in the world can produce is going to go down drastically. You cannot actually support the population of the Earth these days without electrical power. And if you're cutting the power, something's got to give. Therefore, the population will have to go down. Now, yeah, they've got other plans about that. In actual fact, they've been working on that for many years to get the population down. But it all goes hand in hand. So this is an anti-human movement. You can trace it even back to beginning of the century, to people like Bertrand Russell that advocated euthanasia. You can trace it right back to Thomas Malthus, who was an agent of the British East India Company in the early 19th century, who advocated culling the population. This is a new aspect of the same thing that's been mooted now for nearly 200 years.